And on pole position tonight, the Tory manifesto is launched. Is it a bucket wish that'll never be visited? Are protesters chucking things at Nigel Farage a gift for the hard right Reform UK leader? And why is Keir Starmer still obsessed with Jeremy Corbyn? I'm Kevin Maguire, and welcome to tonight's pole position. 15 minutes of political discussion, cutting through the nonsense, getting to what really matters, and hopefully having a few laughs along the way. Tonight, we're joined by the comedian Mark Steele, famous for many shows, but I always love Mark Steele in Your Town, where he turns up, rips the place to shreds in front of locals, and they lap it up. Good evening, Mark.
Hello, Kevin. Yeah, I know it's. I every time I think I'm not going to get away with it this time, and somehow, testimony of British people. Really, they just people write to me going, "Please come to our town and be absolutely savage about us."
It is, Mark, because we can normally slag off our own towns. You say, it's rubbish, it's a terrible part. But the moment an outsider does it, you get all defensive and prickly. Yeah. But you get away with it.
I got to Newport last year, which is a brilliant. I really came to love Newport. It's a very sort of industrial place in the south of Wales. And as I was about to say the opening line, I thought, I can't say this, because the opening line was, Newport is a town that was many years ago known for just industry, docks, mines, grime and squalor, and now the industry and the docks and mines have long been shut down, but somehow you've still got the grime and squalor. I don't know how you've done that. I can't say that. And of course, then they all cheer. And I don't know why. I started off one in Gibraltar. I thought the only possible opening line for this show in Gibraltar is to start by saying, at last, I've got the opportunity to come and do this show in Spain. That was the only possible opening to the show. And people said, you can't say that, but I think if you do it with enough of a twinkle, they know it's deliberately wrong. It's if you say it because you've really got it wrong, they'd be very cross. But yeah, well, we should get to talking about this current election. I'm loving it.
I think I'd rather talk about Mark Steele in Your Town.
Fantastic.
What do you make, Mark? When you've been following the Conservative campaign, would you gaff after gaff, from Drowning Street to leaving the beaches of D-Day to now actually going to Silverstone to launch your manifesto when you look like a crash dummy, wheels are coming off the campaign, you're running out of road. They must be a gift for people like you.
Oh, it's brilliant. I mean, I don't think it's easy to do jokes about it because they're doing the jokes themselves, aren't they? It's like the opposite of the thick of it. They've got no, and that probably is the explanation for it. He hasn't got a team around him very much because he can't trust anybody. And so he's just making decisions by himself. He decides he's going to call the election, doesn't tell anybody. There's nobody to go, you can't go out in the rain, you idiot. What are you doing? There's no one to tell him that. So he's just, and even the manifesto, God knows, there's just, I'll just say whatever comes into my head. Everyone gets free pickled onions. I don't know. Well, I'm going to teach over 80s to skateboard. Just whatever comes into his head. It's just, and no one's really taken any notice, which makes it all the funnier. I think it's marvellous. And D-Day, the D-Day thing, the whole point of the Tories is to say, we love things like D-Day commemorations. And he runs off from it to do an interview he doesn't need to do. And I just think it's marvellous. What's he going to do? Everything he does is going to be... I think it's like when you're a comic and it's gone and there's nothing you can do. And people always say, oh, what's the worst heckle you ever have? But the worst heckle isn't anything bright said by anyone in the audience. It's when they're just not listening anymore. And then occasionally someone might go, shut up, mate. And that's the most devastating thing. And I think that's where Rishi Sunak is.
So do I take it from that you believe the £2.30 a week by 2029, the Resolution Foundation think tank thinks work tax cuts will be worth £2.30 to the average worker a week by 2029, 5 years' time. You don't think that'll swing it for the Conservatives?
Yeah, well, clearly not. I hadn't even followed that figure. But he could say whatever figure he likes. It's not going to make any difference, is it? Because nobody's really listening. And by their own thing last week, when they were saying it was £2,000, he said over and over again in the debate, £2,000 is going to cost you. And then it turns out that's over 4 years. So nobody calculates things over a 4-year period. Nobody says, I earn £100,000 a year. Do you? What? You just work in the co-op, stacking shelf. Well, that's over 4 years. No one says that. So I don't know how they calculate it. He could calculate that £2.30. Is it £2.30 a week?
30 will be worth the tax cuts, national insurance cuts, because of course we'll pay more in income tax with thresholds being frozen by 2029. The overall tax change will be £2.30 a week extra for an average worker.
Yeah, and how much extra do people pay because Liz Truss just destroyed the entire economy in a 45 minutes? It's just gone. It doesn't matter what they say. That's why it's funny. It's just they might as well have a laugh with it and just say they're going to put a giant wave machine in the sea or something to push back all the boats or something. I think they've gone way past anybody listening to £2.30 a week.
Yeah. Do you also, Mark? You're looking in very, very rude and sounding in great health, but you've relied on the NHS a lot, public services.
Yes, completely. Yeah.
Hammering. Are you part of the country that thinks, and polls show it's a significant part, a majority part, think that money anyway should go into public services rather than what are relatively small tax cuts?
Well, absolutely, and I think that Keir Starmer is behind with this as well. I think they're so terrified. I think Labour are so terrified. I mean, I had a line. I sort of feel a bit guilty about it at the moment because I want Labour to win the election. But I had a line that a lot of people I noticed picked up on, which I said that the genius of Keir Starmer is he says absolutely nothing, and then a week later goes back on it. And I think there's something about that with him. He's so terrified of the last election, and he's so scared of being painted as too similar to Jeremy Corbyn that he daren't say anything. And I think you're right. I think that there's all sorts of things that he could do that would be immensely popular. I think it'd be very, very difficult for the Tories to attack him if they said they're going to bring the water companies into public ownership on account of the fact they've given billions of pounds to their greedy shareholders in exchange for pumping endless piles of human waste into the sea. I don't think that's not particularly communist or radical to say, I don't think our water companies should pour human waste into the sea. I think you could say that. And I think the same with all sorts of public services. I think the health service, I'm very lucky. I've had cancer treatment that worked. And my experience of the health service was they were faultless. They were extraordinary. And when I hear lots of other people say that their treatment wasn't like that, because I think cancer is properly funded, then that's just heartbreaking. People left on trolleys all night or waiting months for appointments that mean that they're in all this sort of unnecessary pain. The amount of wealth there is in society, just a tiny fraction of that could solve all of this. I don't think it would be too radical to... even as radical as Blair was in 97, the minimum wage and so on, some of the things that they put forward are, it's easy to forget that did seem radical at the time. Gay civil partnerships and abolishing fox hunting, all these things seemed radical at the time. But it was Blair. It wasn't, we weren't talking about Michael Foot or Corbyn. I think those sorts of things could light this up much, much more, and he would still win by as much, if not more. Yeah,
we'll be clearer on Thursday, hopefully, when Labour's manifesto is published. But you mentioned Jeremy Corbyn, and Keir Starmer seems to be on the verge of a significant Labour victory, possibly a landslide. But he also appears to still be obsessed by Jeremy Corbyn because, for instance, today he said the Tory manifesto was, quotes, like a Jeremy Corbyn-style manifesto. The money isn't there. Now, I remember the 2017 and 2019 Jeremy Corbyn manifestos, but they were costed. I even recall a grey book with the costings. And I think it was the 2019 one. Why do you think he is still obsessed in going back to somebody? I mean, he stood on both those manifestos, Keir Starmer. Why do you think he's obsessed with it? And does it do him any good to still be going on about Jeremy Corbyn?
I don't think it does. I don't think it does do them any good. I can see that it's a very powerful argument that to say, well, we tried the Jeremy Corbyn way and it lost once by a bit and once by a lot, and now we're trying our way and it's going to win by a lot. So that's a very powerful argument, and I think, you know, if you're going to argue against that and say should be more radical, you have to be aware that that is the
reality. Yeah,
that is the reality. But even so, I think it will be possible to just be much more radical then. And I don't think anybody really thinks that this government is going to be ridiculously, outrageously radical in any way. But of course, you're you know, people say generals always fight the last war, and he's terrified, isn't he? He's absolutely terrified of being back. Probably the manifesto, there'll probably be loads in it about we will electrocute Jeremy Corbyn every week live on television in the mornings. We will ban him from Arsenal. We will get. I don't know. It's just you're right. He's absolutely obsessed with him. There was one interview, wasn't it, when it said, "Who would you rather sit next to at Arsenal?" Someone, I can't remember who it was, or Piers Morgan or Jeremy Corbyn, and he said Piers Morgan. That's not the public mood. However unpopular Jeremy Corbyn might have been, he was not as unpopular as Piers Morgan. Didn't Osama bin Laden support Arsenal?
He did.
Yeah. Give him his due. At least he costed his terrorism. I mean, it's no, I think it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
But you know, it's going to be very, very difficult to argue against it in the years to come because he's going to deliver a huge victory. And I'm, you know, I for one, and call me controversial, Kevin, I will be glad of that.
No, yep. Well, if he wins a big majority, a lot of people have voted for him, so you'll be with a significant number of others. Now, Sunak, of course, is having to defend his right flank from Nigel Farage and Reform UK. And Farage was on an open-top bus today in Barnsley in South Yorkshire, and he was pelted by a bloke in a red jacket through a coffee cup. We think it was wet cement he picked up on a building site before he was bundled away by the workers. He's been arrested, follows the milkshake attack in Clacton. Do you think these protesters throwing the things at Farage play into his hands and it's counterproductive for their cause? Because it was Farage who put this video on X, formerly Twitter, to show it. He was almost basking in it.
Yeah, he will do. I mean, you know, the whole raison d'etre, if you like, not raison d'etre, that's the wrong phrase, isn't it? The whole sort of modus operandi, there we are, if we're going to use our correct
very good,
is to, and it always has been, of the sort of furthest elements of right-wing ideology, has been to paint people who are privileged as the victims. You know, that's what that is all about. It's all about people who lead quite nice lives. I'm not saying everybody who follows them, because there's many working class people who have to put up with terrible conditions, but the people running these parties are the same, whether it's Marine Le Pen or the people running the AfD in Germany, or certainly Farage. They are people from very privileged backgrounds who affect an air of like, how much more can we take of this unfair world in which I am born into an immense privilege and go to Dulwich College and make vast sums of money because I'm a banker. How much more of that can we take? And if you're trying to paint yourself as a victim, unlike the people, you know, because you're the one suffering, unlike the elite, such as people who are have fled Syria and are coming across the channel on a homemade boat, then it does play into your hands. And I'm all for protests against people like that. I think if a great many people come out and protest against someone and say, you know, we want it to be known that we don't think that it's right that this man can wander about without opposition voices being heard. This is a bloke who stirs up hatred, and that has real effects on people. You know, when he put up a poster hoarding saying breaking point with lines of foreign people coming over, that has real effects on people. So there should be protests against it, but not one person chucking wet cement. I mean, I don't, you know, it's not because I feel sorry for Nigel Farage, but I just think it helps him make out that he's the victim.
Again, yeah. Mark, thank you so much for joining us tonight. That was terrific. We'll be back tomorrow, 6 p.m, same time, same place.
Thanks so much. I'm loving it. I'm going to go and watch every minute of it. That's not healthy, is it? I'll be honest.
Yeah. Sorry, you'll boost the viewers to 2. Cheers.